I'm sure you can only imagine the delight of Binogi when the opportunity to meet, Linus Gunnarsson had the opportunity to meet Jim Cummins at OISE, and he had the opportunity to share Binogi platform with him. As we move into the next portion of our webinar, I invite you to take a look at this video that was filmed in Stockholm in 2018.
When I first saw the platform and talked to Linus about it, it was I had a very kind of bifurcated response. On the one hand, I was astounded that any company was doing this because it involved a huge amount of work, involved mobilizing the expertise of multiple people with languages that are not widely spoken in Sweden or other countries, languages of immigrant communities, and enabling curriculum content to be expressed orally and in written form through those languages. So it was, it's gone way beyond anything else that I've seen. And so I was astounded at that and positively astounded. On the other hand, the other aspect was, well, of course, this is the obvious thing you've got to do. This is what the research is saying you've got to do. If a student just comes in and at age 13 or 14 and doesn't know Swedish or English in the Canadian context, the level, the cognitive and linguistic level of the curriculum in Swedish is at an extremely high level. It's going to be extremely hard for them to gain the content knowledge, gain the Swedish skills that they need to graduate in the time that they have available, unless we can accelerate that process. So how do we accelerate it? Well, we provide the content in their first language. We provide multimodal support, which enables them to kind of see and hear the content being expressed in very clear ways. And we make the link to Swedish so that students can start off in their first language. As they're learning Swedish, they will gradually increase their exposure to this content, either orally or in written form or both in Swedish. And so you've got a smooth transition across languages. And where the first language is being used as a resource, a foundation for acquiring the second language. And this is so obvious. This is what the research is saying, that there's a positive connection across languages, that the stronger the student's first language develops, the better they're going to do in Swedish. So it's exactly what the research is saying, and it's an obvious thing to do. But for a company to have almost foolishness to think that this was possible, and to take the long-term view that we can do this, and we will invest the money to do this without being worried about immediate economic gain from this, I think was quite remarkable, because I've been involved in helping develop a variety of different curriculum programs, not just in terms of teaching English, but in content areas too. I've provided some of the English as a second language focus on that. And a lot of companies or a lot of programs will try to acknowledge the first language, but they will have maybe some glossary support in the first language, but it's minimal compared to what Binogi and Studia have done. And so I think what you've done is exploit the possibilities of a digital platform in ways that nobody else has done. And so congratulations.
Thank you so much for paying attention with us and following along with that video. At this point, we're going to move to our expert panel discussion. And Jim, the first question is going to go to you. Looking back on that video lesson, looking back on that video clip and thinking about your initial response to Binogi a few years ago when you filmed that in Stockholm with us, what is your impression today? Has it changed at all, or has it evolved?
Well, not surprisingly, I endorse everything I said 2 or 3 years ago. Binogi astounded me then, and it's continued to surprise in terms of the vision of the people who came up with the idea initially. what I think I've seen as Emmanuel and I and colleagues have worked with it in schools is the flexibility that it provides for teachers to use either as a support for their lesson, either before they give their lesson on the topic, or else after they've given a lesson as a review, but also the fact that it can be used by students in their homes. And what we've seen, and Emmanuel may elaborate on this, is that parents and children from Arabic-speaking backgrounds would look at these videos together at home and talk about them. And so you've got things that I never imagined would be happening in terms of parental involvement. So the potential is immense, and I'm just delighted to be associated with it in some way.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Emmanuel, the next question goes to you. Knowing Binogi's history and knowing its history in Sweden and in Germany, based on your previous research, both with Binogi and outside of Binogi, can you tell us how Binogi provides an equitable learning environment for all students and supports teachers in meeting the needs of a variety of learners?
Thank you, Catherine. Well, equity is a big word at the moment. The word everybody wants to see in their classroom, but not per se knows how to, how to implement it in the classroom. So what is equity? Equity is the idea of removing barriers that hinder not all students, but some of the students for one reason or another. And this reason may be, for instance, a difficulty understanding science, or a school language that has yet to be learned, or the fact that the student has not been school in the same program, in the same curriculum, or all of these, or in combination of these. So digital technologies, and now we are talking about Binogi, are very interesting for bringing more equity into the classroom, because they allow us to bypass these barriers. So if you're a student who is having difficulty with science, for instance, you will probably need help from your parents. And with digital technology, students can easily log in at home and ask their parents for help, like most children do. And when we give them the possibility to do so, so we need to give them that possibility. In addition, if the parents themselves struggle with the school language, with a click on the video, they can ensure that they can listen to the video in another language to for themselves to get a full understanding of the video and be able to help their kids. If you are a learner of the school language, well, it is evident what you can do. You can just click on the language and listen whenever it's convenient for you, to just make sure. You know, we all have these ebooks, and then sometimes I see myself a lot clicking on one of the words because I want more meaning for a word. I'm not sure about the meaning. And that's exactly what Binogi does. Gives you the opportunity to deepen your understanding of a word you would like to know more about. And if a student was not raised in the same curriculum, which was my fourth example, then that student will probably be stronger in some of the areas, but will be less strong in other areas. This means that he or she will need more to spend more time on some subjects than on others. And digital technologies make this possible. It means that the teacher, for instance, can ask a student to, during the weekend, or maybe during the day, to review a lesson, do the quizzes, and just check the level of understanding of that student for that particular subject. So in fact, if we summarize what we just said, Binogi and digital technologies allow a differentiated approach to teaching and learning without disrupting the normal course of the classroom. So it is incredible. The possibilities are incredible.
Thank you so much, Emmanuel. And Alexander, the next question is for you. In your opinion, what do you see as the potential of Binogi in mathematics education?
Thanks, Catherine. You can hear me well?
Yes.
Yeah, thank you very much. So I'm very delighted to be participating in this webinar here, and I'm glad to meet other people. I've been working in a research project which involves Binogi for the past 1 year, and if I can summarize the potential of this platform for the learning of mathematics would be the background of my screen. As you can see, the purpose of mathematics is to actually understand and participate in the world. That's why I have this image of writing messages, writing in the world through mathematics. And if we can take that argument further, we understand that our understanding of the world is also mediated by the language and the cultures where we come from. So you have a platform here which portrays the content of mathematics or science for that matter, translating into different languages. You give more access to students to be able to see the world through a mathematical lens, instead of being limited by the language of instruction or the language that they come from their backgrounds. In that sense, what this platform provides is multiple representations of mathematics, either orally on text or even visually. We didn't talk much about the videos in terms of the animations that exist in the platform, but they provide different representations of the same mathematical concept. So it really enriches the classroom, not only for the students who are English learners, just as myself, I'm originally from Brazil, but also for the native English speakers, because they have the opportunity to discuss with their peers and with their teachers how mathematics is represented in different languages and through different media. In that sense, I would say that this platform has the potential to make deeper connections between mathematical concepts.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Alexander. Question number 2, Jim, for you. Educators are encouraged to use or to consider an asset-based approach or an asset-based lens to teaching and learning. How does Binogi support this asset-based approach?
Binogi supports an asset-based approach in at least 2 ways. One is that it adapts itself to the learning styles of students. Some students may be auditory learners, they do better in hearing things. Others may be visual learners. And Binogi provides access to the content through both modes. It also provides scaffolding through the videos that enables students who may not have acquired full academic proficiency in the school language to gain access to the content through what's happening in the video. And the other way it provides access or an asset-based approach is it recognizes that students have cognitive skills, linguistic skills in their home languages that they may not, in typical classrooms, they're not able to use to the same extent as they might. And so when we take account of the fact that it typically takes at least 5 years for students learning the school language to catch up academically in that language. So it takes a lot longer than it takes for them to acquire everyday conversational skills in the language. There's going to be a gap between when they have, in a sense, used up the English as a second language support or language support that they'll get from language specialists, and they're in the mainstream classroom, where the mainstream teacher may not have had the opportunity to gain the kinds of scaffolding skills that we know are necessary. And so by having access to the first language in Binogi, the student can keep up with content as she or he is learning the school language. And so both for the teacher, the mainstream classroom teacher, and for the student, it provides solutions to problems that are out there and have been out there for a long time.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Alexander, thinking from an inclusion perspective, why or how do you think Binogi supports STEM teaching and learning opportunities for students?
Thanks, Catherine. In terms of inclusion and equity, particularly in the field of STEM, the research literature talks about 2 main aspects which I see a connection with the platform here. The first one is about mathematics and science identities. So traditionally, we would think that students would be having more equitable classes if they understand the concept and the content of mathematics and science. But recent literature has been shown that equity and inclusion in the mathematics and science classrooms looks like developing a sense of belonging to the content and to that professional or disciplinary expertise area. Here, because students have access to math and science in their own native languages, or even exploring languages that they have an interest perhaps as well, they develop a sense that perhaps math and science can be something they can pursue. So developing this sort of identity or this sense of belonging might be one way of promoting equity and inclusion. The second one, which is a little bit more on the practical side, for those of you here who have experience as teachers, you might relate to that, which is related to assessment. Sometimes when students, I know you don't like the word fail, but when they don't succeed in their assessment and evaluations, teachers might very quickly jump into the conclusion that students don't know the concept or they don't grasp really well the content. But if we have students that come from different backgrounds in our classes, perhaps it might be a barrier of the language that they didn't really get access to the content. But here, we kind of eliminate this sort of barrier and we get to the point in which we want to really understand whether the students grasp a conceptual understanding of the content. So these two ways might be these two options or opportunities might be one way to promote more equity and inclusion in your classes through Binogi.
Excellent. Thank you so much. I like to think of it as leveling the playing field for students in so many ways.
Right.
Emmanuel, the next question is for you. What are your thoughts on how Binogi approaches its ongoing development?
Well, thank you, Catherine. That's a tough question. But first, I would like to start by saying that when we met with Binogi, the Binogi team 3 years ago, I really had the feeling at the time that they had developed what I dreamed of developing without having the possibilities to do so. So I would really like to say it. So I would start to answer by saying that the fact that Binogi is so open to research, and when I say open, it's really open. So making the platform available for researchers really showed me that the team is trying very hard to help us develop a pedagogy that best integrates digital literacies. So one of the things we discovered doing research on Binogi, but that was even more evident with the pandemic, is that we teachers, we had kind of a naive approach to digital technologies. We thought that all we had to do was, to use it and the students would learn. So to show, for instance, a YouTube film and the students would learn. But today we realize that digital technologies must be integrated into a defined pedagogical framework with clear objectives. And that's really what we are trying to do in our research with Binogi and in collaboration with schools and teachers to explore the possibility of how to frame this resource in a clear, safe, and defined educational framework. And the Binogi team is once again very open to this, putting their material and products at our disposal and always developing even more when we ask for it. So it is not only the feedback of the researchers, you will be surprised that Binogi seeks, but if you use the platform, you will see that there is the possibility to send feedback through a kind of comment area. And having worked with the Binogi team for more than 3 years now, I can tell you that this feedback is going to be taken very seriously by the team that is going to solve your problem as quickly as possible. So this is a very big difference with books, for instance, whose content is really fixed, and you don't write to the editor to signal a mistake. You just say, tell your students, don't read that. Well, with Binogi, it's always evolving, and we know how necessary it is. So look at Ontario, for instance. The math curriculum changed this year, and the science curriculum is changing next year. So there is a very high need here to be flexible and fluid. So I would say that Binogi's aspiration to keep improving is both ambitious and extremely attractive. And I believe that it is the future in terms of developing educational material. So it's really this triangulation, developers, teachers, and school stakeholders, and researchers, of course, so who need to continue to work together. And I really appreciate that.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And we clearly appreciate the opportunity to work with researchers as well. Um, the final
Catherine,
question, yes, of course, Alexander.
do you mind if I add on to what Emmanuel just mentioned? Because I really appreciated that her mentioned the school materials, the pedagogical, the textbooks and things like that. If we think about curricula that are changing in mathematics and in science, as she mentioned, new areas or new sub-strands of mathematics and science have been added into curricula across Canada. And some of those areas, we don't have experts yet. For example, financial literacy or coding, it's just now that research is catching up onto developing pedagogies and content that really fits within the school curricula as proposed. So a tool or a platform that really fast tracks the process of development would be very attractive for teachers instead of waiting for publishers to really publish that big content textbook or encyclopedia or whatever it is.
Excellent point. Thank you so much. Jim, the final question today goes to you. Why and for whom, in your opinion, do you think it might be beneficial for a school board or a school to engage in a long-term project with Binogi over a period of a few years rather than a short-term project?
I think what we're talking about here is building capacity. Binogi provides an opportunity for a school or a school board to build capacity to meet the needs of all of its students. Emmanuel talked about inclusion, and Binogi is a route to inclusion like no other. And when we look at any tool like this, it takes time to become fully aware of its possibilities. It takes time to form a community within the school that are working with the tool. It takes time to think about what improvements could be made. And so that capacity building is a process. It doesn't just happen overnight. And so if a school makes a longer term commitment to use a tool like this, the process becomes one of not just using a tool the way it is, but also being creative in using the tool and finding other ways in which the tool can be used that possibly the developers didn't even think about or researchers didn't think about. And I think another aspect is, as you've mentioned, and Emmanuel has mentioned, we're looking at a partnership here. And this is a partnership that's two-way, where the users of the tool are also helping to create and improve the tool. And so that requires a longer term commitment on both sides. So it makes sense to see this in the long term because it's a tool, as Emmanuel said, it's a tool like no other. And but it'll take time for everybody to become familiar with it and to share ideas and creative ways of working with the tool.
Yes, thank you so much. It is definitely a partnership, and that is what we invite people to join us in, is a partnership, because we really appreciate that feedback. And without teachers and students and schools and researchers, we won't progress. And so we need that partnership, and we really welcome that feedback all the time from all of our users.